West Denver. Sleep deprived and heavily caffeinated.
All right, let's do this then.
This is the Jeff and Bill Show.
I don't agree with that.
They don't always agree, but hey, at least they have coffee.
Coffee.
And each other.
I love you, man.
God help us.
I want to bless him. We need all the help we can get.
Now here's Jeff Hunt and Bill Thorpe. The Jeff and Bill Show on News Talk 710 KNUS.
9 a.m. in the Mile High City on this Wednesday, July 30th, 2025. Good morning, Denver, Colorado. You've tuned into the Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710 KNUS. Could we see some big changes coming from the EPA? Well, they unveiled plans to revoke Obama-era climate endangerment finding. What does this mean for the future of oil and gas development in our communities? Is there going to be a whole bunch of poison in the air now as a result of it? We'll cover this hour. Now is time, though, for news and comment with Blake Olson.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
Hey, good morning. It is Wednesday, hump day, 66, mostly sunny. Beautiful outside again, expecting a high of 80 today. This portion of the news sponsored by Pastor Camp Heating and Air Conditioning at 303-777-1234 to learn more about special savings opportunities on Lennox equipment. Our top story, jurors are now deliberating the fate of James Craig, the Aurora dentist accused of poisoning his wife with cyanide while she was hospitalized in 2023. In closing arguments on Tuesday, 18th Judicial District Deputy District Attorney Michael Morrow described Craig as a man on a mission.
He wanted out of his marriage. He was tired of it. He was tired of going round and around, having an affair, getting caught, digging himself out, and then repeating that cycle. He wanted out.
We'll see what happens today. DJT posted last hour a meme of all the criminals behind bars: Barry, Clapper, Brennan, Comey, Clinton, Rice, and a few more lizards. And then another one this morning that says it's time to indict Barry, the traitor for treason. And writer-cartoonist Scott Adams says nothing will change unless...
The only thing that would change that is a perp walk, or actually arresting Obama, or Brennan, or Clapper, or Comey. So, I've said before that normally I'm not too keen on one administration punishing the last administration, because that's a slippery slope to complete chaos. But that's only if you're the one who's starting it. If the other side started it and they made it clear that they will do absolutely anything, including the fine people hoax, including covering up Biden's brain, including saying things that would get Trump assassinated, and including the Russia hoax, there's absolutely nothing that they wouldn't do to retain power.
That's right. You start it, I finish it. The great General Mike Flynn holding the line.
I think a lot of what we're going to learn in leading up to 2020 is the coup. And remember, President Trump was the president at that time, right? The 51 intel and defense advisors that signed the Hunter Biden letter. I mean, that's public now. There's a lot of other things that are not public that led up to 2020 that led to the coup and the rigged election where Uncle Joe became the president of the United States. And
Attorney Jonathan Turley on Fox News Channel.
We're finally seeing parts of the timeline filled in, and it's creating a very damning picture. Remember, in July 2016, John Brennan went to Obama and briefed him that Hillary Clinton was going to invent this Russian collusion theory to distract from her email scandal. And so that was back in July. And then we now know, because of recently declassified material, that months later, it was Brennan who intervened, overruled people at CIA, and put the Steele dossier, this infamous debunked report, into the assessment being used by the Obama White House at the very end of Obama's term.
The Daily Caller reporting this morning that many Latino Americans living along the southern border are voicing strong support for 47's handling of illegal immigration enforcement, adding that they got exactly what they voted for. The U.S. economy is growing at a stronger pace than expected. The latest GDP report showed a 3% increase from April through June. That number came in above expectations of 2.3%. The period this GDP report included 47's announcement of tariffs against most countries in April. Also today, the Fed expected to announce that they are keeping rates where they are. We will see a massive 8.8 earthquake of Russia's coast triggered tsunami waves across the Pacific this morning and last night. The warnings have been downgraded to advisories for Hawaii and the West Coast. A House committee denying a request by Ghislaine Maxwell for immunity in exchange for her testimony in the Epstein case. Maxwell's lawyers said she would be willing to testify before Congress if she was given formal immunity. The 27-year-old man who shot 4 people to death at the office building in Manhattan before taking his own life on Monday was angry at the NFL and CTE issues. The NFL is headquartered in that building. Shane Tamura's father was an LA police officer for 27 years before he retired in 2017. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell says that they've increased security in the building. CU running back Charlie Offerdahl, a fan favorite from Dakota Ridge High School, says that he's calling it quits due to concussions over his career so he can focus on dental school. He's almost set to graduate, and then he's ready for dental school coming up. Great family. Good luck to him. He is what college football is all about. Rockies lose to the Guardians 10-4, back at it this afternoon. 63 in Lafayette, 64 in Centennial, 66 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Monsoonal moisture is back, and it's here to stay for a while. Expect partly cloudy to mostly cloudy today, upper 80s, kind of muggy with afternoon and evening showers and thunderstorms, lower 60s tonight. Highs will stay in the lower 80s Wednesday through Friday with a daily chance of thunderstorms each day, lingering till evening. Weather is a service of L&L Heating and Air Conditioning. For quick, trustworthy, and dependable service, call L&L Heating and Air Conditioning at 720-851-1691. Visit them online at bestdenverhvac.com. You'll be comfortable with L&L. Meteorologist Don Day in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
All right, so the Clean Air Act allows the federal government to regulate pollutants that are in the air. Right? Makes sense. So, Clean Air Act, if there's pollutants in the air, the federal government can step in to help regulate those to protect people from the pollutants. Well, in 2009, the Obama administration had what's called an endangerment finding that declared that carbon monoxide and methane are pollutants in the air. Ergo, the EPA can regulate carbon monoxide and methane. And this became the basis for $1 trillion worth of regulations upon everything from cars, their mileage, to gasoline, to oil and gas development, all that stuff under this finding. that took place in 2009 under the Obama administration. Well, yesterday, Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Lee Zeldin unveiled a plan to scrap the Obama-era endangerment finding declaration, which serves as the legal foundation of a host of climate regulations stemming from the Clean Air Act. This is Fox Business reporting. That law limits air pollutant emissions from sources including chemical plants, utilities, and steel mills. As a result, Zeldin's proposal would rescind the 2009 endangerment finding, which asserts that greenhouse gases like carbon monoxide and methane threaten public health. With this proposal, the Trump EPA is proposing to end 16 years of uncertainty for automakers and American consumers, Zeldin said in a statement. In our work so far, many stakeholders have told me that the Obama and Biden EPAs twisted the law, ignored precedent, and warped science to achieve their preferred ends and stick American families with hundreds of billions of dollars in hidden taxes every single year. Zeldin first announced plans to undo the regulation during an interview on the Ruthless podcast that aired on Tuesday, where he characterized the move as one that will drive a dagger into the heart of climate change religion. Additionally, Zeldin said the proposed change would save Americans over $54 billion annually by scaling back regulations such as former President Joe Biden's electric vehicle mandate. A lot of people out there are listening. They might not know what the endangerment finding is. If you ask congressional Democrats to describe what it is, the left would say that it means that carbon dioxide is a pollutant. Carbon dioxide is an endangerment to human health. They might say methane is a pollutant, and methane is an endangerment to human health. That's an oversimplified, I would say inaccurate way to describe it, Zeldin said. The Obama administration said that carbon dioxide, which mixed with a bunch of other well-mixed gases, greenhouse gases, that it contributes to climate change. How much? They don't say. They say that climate change endangers human health. So because of these different mental leaps, then there were all sorts of vehicle regulations that followed. Still, it will take a while before the finding is officially repealed, as it must undergo several hurdles, including a public comment period. Likewise, the proposal is expected to encounter legal challenges from environmental groups. The Environmental Defense Fund, a nonprofit organization dedicated to environmental issues, cautioned that repealing the Obama-era finding would lead to dangerous consequences. These actions would lead to a predictable result. If there are no enforcement limits on pollution, you get more of it, making life expensive and even more dangerous. The stakes could not be higher for Americans. Bill, is this the repeal of an improperly used finding to drive a lot of regulations to the tune of $1 trillion on Americans? Or is this going to result in climate catastrophe as pollution is unleashed upon the American people? Your thoughts, sir?
I'd say a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B is probably it. Are some of the rules and regulations likely overstepping bounds? Yeah, probably. But the absence of which make things better? I disagree with that one, only because we have a long history of corporations, especially large ones, really not liking regulations, which is fair, but the one thing they're not necessarily motivated towards is keeping environments and areas and things like that clean. The disposal of waste or things like that doesn't seem to always take into account the impact or effect of. Same thing with pollution, same thing, that idea. There wasn't a single, before we started implementing some of these EPA regulations, I didn't hear a lot of the auto manufacturers being super concerned about emissions or gas mileage or any of those things. But again, I grew up in an era where parents would smoke inside the car and have the windows up. So it's not as if, we were always running around looking for the most healthy thing possible. So again, I think it's a balance of both. Does the administration probably have a point that some of these rules and regulations overstepped boundaries and contemporary scientific knowledge? Yes. But is necessarily large-scale rolling back of them going to make it better? I would disagree. And the other part is, I understand the idea of all these regulations did a $1 trillion of damage and cost to the American consumer. You know it's not going to happen? The company's trying to give that money back. And what I mean by that is, how many times inside of something just that we've experienced lately, we had an inflationary cycle during the Biden administration that was unlike anything that many of us has experienced in our lifetime, save portions of the 70s. Huge, huge inflation. We saw product prices rise and rise and rise. Now, inflation has returned to more normal levels. Those prices go back down in some cases? Or do they stay where they were? Now, we saw things like eggs, where based on avian flu and other things, the price went up, demand went up, and went back down. But the one that I keep holding on to is soda. During that inflationary crisis, we saw soda prices increase dramatically, sometimes as much as 13% a quarter. And the companies involved were telling us, we are doing this in part because of inflation, but also this is an excellent example for profit taking. Excellent example to raise the prices. They didn't bring them necessarily back down afterwards. So I'm less convinced that if these regulations go away, that all of a sudden stuff's going to be less expensive for the American consumer. If the manufacturers of automobiles don't have to spend the money to put all of the environmental regulations and to deal with all of that, do you think they're lowering the price of the car? Or do they just look at that and go, hey, we don't have to spend X. The customer's already paying Y. This just increases profit margin. Why would they not do that?
Fair point. My concern, though, is that this 2009 finding was a blank check in the hands of a progressive administration to attack the oil and gas industries. So basically, the Clean Air Act goes, well, if it's a pollutant, you guys can regulate it. And then the Obama administration went and said, well, carbon dioxide and methane's pollutants. Ergo, we can do whatever we want regulatory-wise with oil and gas companies, with car companies, with chemical companies, because this is essentially a blank check. We have total permission. And this gets into the U.S. Supreme Court case and what Neil Gorsuch was arguing for years, which was this kind of overreach of the executive branch. That in the rulemaking of the executive branch, which this was done in the rulemaking process, and it'll be repealed in the rulemaking process, but you took the power out of the hands of the people and you put it among non-elected bureaucrats who now have a tremendous power to regulate, often on things that were never written into law. So when you just say, well, all pollutants can be regulated by the federal government, carbon dioxide, methane, pollutant, we get to now regulate and write laws and rules, gets into the Chevron deference decision. And that was based in the rule around fishing boats and their ability to fish, and rules got added on to, well, now you have to carry this GPS monitoring so we can see where you're going and how much you're fishing and all that stuff, all under the guise of an original rule that was made about managing fishing that was taking place. And so the Supreme Court overturns this, the Chevron deference case, and now gives the power back to the legislature. So and believe me, there's plenty of critique as to whether or not you'll ever get any regulations on methane and carbon dioxide through Congress. They can't pass anything. And now you're going to have lobbyists weighing in and powerful corporate interests and all that stuff. They're going to weigh into the process. So you can make the argument, and I think it's a fair argument, that you put this into the process of Congress to write the rules and the laws. Well, you're never going to get anything, and you're not going to get anything that's meaningful because the whole process is going to be tainted by special interest groups. But at the same time, you leave it in the hands of the executive branch and the EPA, and you just give them a blank check, and some unelected bureaucrat who's primarily motivated by this belief that the climate is changing so much so that if we don't stop it immediately, we're going to end up with huge detrimental problems to our future. That guy sitting in an office somewhere in Washington, D.C., with those beliefs and that motivation, could just write whatever rule he wants. Just got to get passed through the little rulemaking process. Guy was never elected. So I look at this and I go, you're kind of darned if you do and darned if you don't. We take this out of the rulemaking process. If we put it into Congress, well, it's going to get real ugly. I get it. You're going to end up with lobbyists, and you're probably not going to get anything through that. It's a rat's nest. You leave it in the hands of the EPA, well, Obama and Biden come in with this strong, almost religious belief in global warming and climate change. Well, they're going to hurt every industry out there. So what do you do? What do you do at this point? I go, it's best to put it in the hands of the people. It's a messy process. It's stupid. You got lobbyists, but at least the people have a bit of control here versus a bureaucrat in the executive branch somewhere in an office in Washington, D.C., writing rules that everybody has to abide by. So the Trump administration not making the argument that, all of a sudden methane is fine and carbon dioxide's never really a poison. They're making the legal argument that the power doesn't belong with an unelected bureaucrat. It belongs in Congress. And if Congress wants to regulate, let's say, chemical factories based upon this type of chemical they're putting in the air, then Congress should step up and do it. Join the conversation. Would love to hear from you. 303-696-1971. 303-696-1971, or text us on the Dan Caplis Law text line at 720-819-5115. Let's go to the phone lines. Brad, Highlands Ranch. Good morning, Brad. You're on with Jeff and Bill.
Morning.
Good morning. Hey, I just want to talk about a local situation during home rule discussion for Douglas County. I did some research about auto admissions because there's 64 counties in the state and only 10 counties are required to do auto admissions. And then you take the second largest city or county in the state, which is Colorado Springs, and it's not required to have admissions at all. Now you take a look at the fees and the costs. Douglas County alone is paying about $5.9 million a year in fees. And we're paying about $3.9 million a year in repairs to keep our cars up to EPA standards. That is why this thing needs to end. As you were talking about earlier, these unelected bureaucrats are writing rules that are unfair, unjust. They don't even know if the people in El Paso County have tires good enough to go up the mountains. They don't know if their wipers work or if their blinkers work. They don't look at cars down there. And so the amount of money we spend to keep our vehicles on the road in Denver, Arapahoe, and different counties, it is not a fair shake. They don't have that cost. I just spent $8,000 repairing parts inside my diesel truck to get it up to standard so it could pass a diesel admissions. And so, now at this point I can get my truck exempt to where I never have to do it again because I spent so much money getting it to that level. It's an unfair cost. And I'm glad the administration is stepping up and addressing this. I hope they remove this 100% because it's an unfair system.
Brad, I want to ask you this. Here's the counter side to what you just said. You and I grew up in Colorado. I don't know if you did, Brad. Bill, you did. You remember there used to be like smog haze during the winter that just sat over the city of Denver for like 3 months.
Yeah.
And it was brown and it was awful.
Yeah, the brown
and
cloud.
You looked out and you were just like, live in the ugliest city, just this big brown cloud. I noticed that is not as prevalent. I'm saying it might still be there, but it's not as prevalent anymore. Could someone make the argument that these regulations are improving our communities? Yes, they cost money, but at least the environment's better. It's easier to breathe. And so it's important to keep these in place. Brad, your thoughts?
Well, just recently, Boulder did a study and said that nothing has changed since the beginning of all of these regulations, that no standard that has been put in place has changed the testing whatsoever. That was just recently published out of Boulder, and I think they tested 2 other counties that are part of the emissions. And so they were very disappointed that there were no changes. I think the brown cloud goes all the way back to the beginning of reporting. I mean, they've talked about this brown cloud before cars were even on streets. that it would just hover over these certain areas in the to the east of the mountains, and this brown cloud would just appear. And I think it has a lot to do more with demographics of the land than it does with any type of auto or emissions or anything like that. So I think that is old history, and I'm pretty sure you can look it up and see that is something that has been noted for a long time here in Colorado.
Bill, your thoughts?
What I'm wondering about, Brad, is that, again, if I was going to play devil's advocate, could the people doing the research in Boulder say that, based on emissions and air standards, nothing's changed, in part because of what you outlined, that there are only several counties that test emissions and require us to follow the emissions? Could someone that is in favor of that study make the argument that if we had the emissions enforced the same way they are in Denver, Arapahoe counties, and elsewhere, if they were enforced across the state, that we would have seen improvement? Could they make that argument in your mind?
Well, what are we, 2/3 of the population? Pretty much. So if 2/3 of the populations are being regulated and the rest of Colorado is not, I would say that that's a majority, and if it's not showing any signs, at least it's a great test or study that it didn't work, that the catalytic converters aren't working, that these systems on these cars that, are not working, but they're making the cars more expensive and they cost more to run, and we're throwing them away sooner, which causes more waste, and it does more harm to the environment. In the back end, it's kind of like a windmill. It costs more to make it, and it uses more oil, to produce the windmill and the concrete on the ground that holds the windmill up than the windmill is producing in energy. I think we're losing on the back end of the car because we're throwing the cars away at 150,000 miles when they should be going 400 and 500,000 miles. Because the engines are built that good. If we removed the EPA standards out of these engines would run. And they would run for a long time, and they would run efficiently. Diesel does not go up. Diesel falls down. I've never been down a highway and looked at the side of the road and went, the environment is destroying the highway. I mean, some of the most beautiful places in the world are along the side of the highway. Wildflowers, everything are growing. If what they're telling us is true, then why do our highways look so good, and why is it all just dead? It's not. I just don't know that we're being told the truth.
Brad, appreciate the call. Thanks so much. Brad from Highlands Ranch, you're welcome to join the conversation. Brad's line will be open, 303-696-1971, or text us on the Dan Caplis Law text line at 720-819-5115. We'll continue. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's talk leader, News Talk 710, KNUS.
back to the Jeff and Bill show. We're talking the EPA's effort to undo the Obama era endangerment finding. Now, Colorado's lawmakers have fully embraced the belief that our oil and gas industry needs to be heavily regulated in an effort to protect the future, the environment, to protect us from climate change. This has had a dramatic impact on oil and gas leases in the state, the amount that's been made, the amount of taxes that are coming into the government as a result. Everything's basically kind of stalled. The growth that you saw in the 90s, early 2000s, 2010s, 2019 was kind of the high point of fracking that was taking place in Colorado. And then, lo and behold, the progressives down at the Colorado State Capitol step in and start putting a bunch of regulations in. In fact, if you remember, there was on the ballot an effort to create some setbacks around oil and gas that would have pushed the industry so aggressively that you would have almost no oil and gas except for this tiny little section up in eastern Colorado that would have allowed it. That was rejected. And then the very next year, lawmakers come before the state legislature and implement some very restrictive rules around what counties and localities can do with regards to oil and gas, and have essentially stalled out the industry. Hasn't completely left Colorado, but it's not growing at the level it was. It's not producing the tax revenue at the level it was. Do you like this Colorado? Jared Polis wants 2040. He wants everything to be green. He wants windmills and solar panels all along the eastern plains. And part of the fight where we are out in Elbert County has to do with this Excel energy line, this transmission line that's going to run out to all of these future developments in eastern Colorado with windmills and solar panels, because you got to build them somewhere. You're not going to build them in Denver. You got to build them on the eastern plains, and then you have to put in these very powerful, very big power lines that are going to run them all the way into the city. So you're going to fundamentally remake the state. Is this good? I think it's terrible. I think the oil and gas industry was a tremendous blessing to the state of Colorado. As I mentioned, the tax revenue that has come from that, the jobs, the cheap, reliable source of energy. I think there's a lot of problems with green energy. I don't think it's the big, beautiful trade-off that everybody says it is. Oh, if we just build some windmills, of course, we're not going to be fracking like we used to. Well, you need to get the gasoline to drive the trucks out there. You need to build those windmills. You need to dispose of those windmills. You need to build the concrete pads that they're on. This is not just a trade-off. There's a lot of oil and gas that goes into building these solar panels and these windmills. So for Jared Polis to push us and the Democrats to 2040, totally green energy, remake eastern Colorado, put in big power lines in order to get that power into the city of Denver, meanwhile kneecapping the oil and gas industry, all to achieve this mandate. This belief, as Lee Zeldin said, almost a religious belief in global warming, I think is problematic, and I think it harms our state. Bill, your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, well, the Democrats tried to overreach with these setbacks, but again, it wasn't just out of nowhere. That was because a house exploded and killed 2 people. And it was based on, I think it was an uncapped gas or oil line. Correct. And so there were problems in the system. And without other rules and regulations, I am hard-pressed to think that the industry would self-regulate that way, would be that worried about consequences. And so there is a place for rules and regulations, because left to their own devices, and we've seen it go through even the industrial age here in America, that the companies don't necessarily have altruistic motives. So they're not necessarily concerned about clean air, clean water, the surviving, stuff like that. Look at the cigarette industry. They knew it was poison for years and encouraged us in saying that it was good for you at times, and then that it wasn't even not harmful for you, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So they have, manufacturers have played a lot of games as well on their side as far as what the products are. And I think the truth is probably somewhere in between. Yeah, I think the Democrats have probably overreached, but I do think that there is a time and a place for it, because you look at mining companies. If there weren't rules and regulations about how to close down those mines afterwards, they probably wouldn't do anything at all to them, because it would be better for the profit margin. And I understand the critique of the green energy and the oil and gas that's used to build a lot of it, but that oil and gas is also used to build the oil and gas stuff. The fracking, that all is built and done, and all those trucks drive the same thing. And so, yes, there is oil and gas that is involved in the renewables. The argument that I have with renewables and green energy is that it's too often an argument of if this, then that, or one or the other. It should be both. It really should be a conversation about both. And just on a side note here, we talk about wanting the U.S. to lead in artificial intelligence. If we are going to do that with the data centers, you have to have green energy. We cannot oil and gas our way into the energy production that is needed for those data centers. You have to supplement it with green energy. That's the only way that it economically. Yes,
I thought you were going to go a different direction, because what I've heard with regards to the power that's necessary for these AI operations is tremendous amount of power.
Oh, yeah.
More power than we've ever had. So the idea that a windmill or a set of solar panels out in eastern Colorado is going to provide that?
Well, here's the thing.
But I can maybe understand supplementing it.
Well, it's supplementing.
But if you go to 2040, which is what Jared Polis wants, all energy is green energy, and I put green in quotes, green energy in Colorado, then you're not going to be able to sustain AI development.
Yeah, the thing for me is that the 2040 promise and the green energy, for me, that's politicking. I never held him to that, nor did I think that was going to be achievable. And and something that is like that is, do you remember when Elon Musk announced the Hyperloop, and there was a race from cities to announce who's going to get the contract to get Elon Musk to sign the Hyperloop? I don't think we did, but I know we were in the play for it.
Yeah.
But again, he hasn't built more than like 2 miles of it after all these years, and no cities are seeing it be built. So for me, that was politicking. That at the time in which that was an issue, Jared had to come out and say, we're going to be all green by it. And no, we're not. There's no way. And for me, that's the problem in the conversation, is it needs to be a supplement. Green energy needs to be a supplement to our oil and gas for a variety of reasons in my mind. And one of those being the idea of artificial intelligence in those data centers, that we do not want to, or don't have the capacity to build and then produce the energy needed through oil and gas. It is going to have to be supplemented through green energy. Some of those plants need to have solar roofs. There could be some wind turbines that are out there as well. We can talk about other ways that they can do it, but it needs to be a combination of all of them if we are going to achieve these kind of energy goals that we are looking at.
Is it a combination, or are we just dancing around what we know is the actual solution to these problems?
Well, what is the actual solution then? Let me know what they.
I think we know it.
Which is what? Because I'm not sure I know it then.
Really?
So help me. Yeah, help me understand.
Nuclear.
Oh, I'm not convinced of that. I'm not sure that's the exact solution. And the reason why is someone's going to have to tell me what we're going to do with nuclear waste and how that storage is going to be. Because what I have a problem with is I have a problem with the idea that we are just going to store it somewhere on the planet. And the only reason...
You could shoot it into space.
Well, again, if that's the idea, I would love to hear it. And then I think that, to me, is more amenable than the idea of storing it here on the planet. But shooting it to space, much more expensive than storing it here. And the problem I have with the idea of us storing it here is I am old enough in Denver to remember what Highlands Ranch looked like before it was Highlands Ranch. It was a landfill. I used to go out there and shoot rats with 22s where all those rich big houses are. Yes, you got your McMansions out there. You're near your pool. You got your country club area out there. I used to shoot rats in the trash that your houses are built on in some of those areas. Yes, you got trash underneath that ground sometimes. That's what Highlands Ranch used to be. It was a landfill. But that's what we run into. And so what I'm worried about is that we eventually are going to get to a situation where, we've stored all of this nuclear waste here. What do we do with it now? If I have a solution to that, I'm all in. And that's the problem I have with going hardcore nuclear, meaning replacing a lot more things. I think nuclear is a great supplement. But the problem I've got is the waste on the side. But I think our nuclear technology is way beyond anything that the average person really understands as far as the safety inside of those nuclear power plants. They have some amazing technology right now. And yeah, I think that's part of the issue as well. That should be part of it. Although
5453 texting in. Glad someone else remembers that Highland Ranch was a landfill.
Hey, high five. That is one of my favorite things to do when I drive through those neighborhoods, all those big houses. I'm like, yeah, I remember when this smelled like butt out here. It was awful. I was going to say another word, and I can't. That's early in the morning. So, yeah, I remember when it was awful. Yeah, it used to be a landfill, guys. Just like,
Jason, nuclear is too expensive. Natural gas electricity is the best short-term solution. But even, Jason, the progressives want to shut down natural gas. I remember when every bus used to have like a little sign on the back that said, natural, powered by clean natural gas.
Yeah,
and
natural
now,
gas is great.
Now they're shutting down natural gas options and trying to make everything what I lovingly call a coal-powered, because your battery, your electric car, your electric bus that's charged is more often than not powered. That energy is coming from a coal plant somewhere, so you're just driving around coal-powered cars.
Here's the thing, man. Here's the thing. The people that are the green energy advocates, the biggest problem or the biggest issue they have with their argument is the fact that we are going to need the oil and gas in part to generate some of this power. We are going to need it. It can't be an either or. The biggest detriment they've ever made is an either or. It's not the oil and gas industry that made the either or argument. It's the green energy people that started the either or argument, and that's their problem. It should have been, this will be, and again, let's talk about this for capitalism for just a sec. What would happen if we had, I don't know, competition inside of it,
Look,
for energy sources?
I'm all for that, but you're making the argument that the EPA ruling was progressives going, well, what the oil and gas industry is creating is poison, therefore we have to regulate it. By the way, these windmills and solar panels are going to save us. I just think before, and right now it's happening, eastern Colorado is being populated by these mega solar farms, these mega wind farms. I think it's ugly. I think it's destructive. I think it's going to ruin eastern Colorado. Oil and gas and fracking rigs are much smaller. They produce a lot more abundant, cheaper energy. And at the end of the day, I think we're all steaming towards nuclear. I think that's going to be the solution. We do have a text message about deep plasma drilling geothermal wells. I've heard those are an option too.
Yeah, they are. And here's the thing. I don't like the solar farms. I understand your idea. The idea, taking up the vast spaces there. As far as with solar farms, I think is an inefficient use of the land. I think we're being very dumb with solar because we have a very easy solution, I believe. The problem is the technology isn't there yet. And again, another rock I'm going to throw at Elon because he promised this years ago. And I have a list. I will hold him accountable for the stuff that he says we're going to be able to do, and I'm going to do. This is the idea. You want to make solar efficient, and you want to make it work for the average person. It's solar roofs. That's what you do because we already have the footprint. Your house already exists. Your roof has to be there. The roof is at the top of the structure. That's where we need to start putting the solar panels. We need to make it more efficient. We need to make sure that they are longer lasting. We need to invest in the technology there. But that's the solution, not a large solar farm out on the eastern plains of Colorado. The issue is drop them on top of every house. How much energy could you generate if you had 90% of the roofs in the Denver metro area have solar panels? It wouldn't replace oil and gas, nor should it. But you know what it's going to do? It's going to lower your energy bills, and it's going to lower the price of gas you're paying at the pump, and it's going to help us produce more energy. It's not an either-or trade. It's a matter of how do they work together. That's the solution. Stop making these giant, big solar, platforms out in the middle of nowhere. You put them on top of structures that exist. Take advantage of the structures that exist. One of the problems we have with housing, there are a whole bunch of federal buildings around town that we could use and could be converted into affordable housing. I'm staring at you, post offices. Redo those post offices where the post office is on the bottom floor and you build housing above them. Those are in major metropolitan areas. They're corners. That's where it exists.
5453 texting in, well, just make the roofs on your cars electric too. There we go. All right.
There are a couple of companies working on that, and if that happens, do you have any idea what that means for the EV? You no longer have to stop and charge.
Be very
How does
cool.
that change EVs?
You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
To the Jeff and Bill Show. What an honor to be on the same station as Scott Jennings, Charlie Kirk. Wow. So exciting. Great show. Kendra Castillo's being considered for sainthood. We talked with the father of the hero from Highlands Ranch. Also debated whether Sydney Sweeney's ad campaign is classic Americana or just an effort to advance whiteness and eugenics. If you missed any of that, go to 710knus.com to download the podcast. That's 710knus.com to download the podcast. So, Bill, we're still on wait for the James Craig trial verdict.
Yes, we are. Maybe by tomorrow.
You think we'll know by tomorrow?
Oh, I hope so. If not, you're not going to have something to talk about. What have they hung up on?
Ah, that's right. All right, you've been listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
Denver's talk leader, News Talk 710, KNUS.
Wake up, Denver. There's no better place to start your morning than IHOP, where the pancakes are fluffy, the coffee is hot, and the smiles are endless. Wednesday, August 27th, join Jeff and Bill as they broadcast their show live from IHOP at 1595 South Colorado Boulevard in Denver. You're officially invited to be part of the excitement. Come grab your favorite breakfast and watch the Jeff and Bill Show in action from 6 to 10 a.m. Don't forget to try the special Jeff and Bill breakfast. Pancakes, any style eggs, and crispy bacon, all for just $7.10. It's a deal as good as their hot takes. All they need is you. Bring your appetite, bring your friends, and kick off your day with great food and great conversation. See you Wednesday, August 27th at IHOP.